Welcome to a place where family secrets don't stay buried. They rise, twist, and tear everything apart. Here, every story begins with a promise of love, but ends with betrayal sharp enough to cut through blood ties. Behind the walls of perfect marriages, whispered lies turn into daggers, and the people closest are often the ones who conspire the hardest. These aren't just tales of husbands and wives, brothers and sisters. They are revelations of stolen inheritances, forbidden desires, and masks that shatter under the weight of truth. Each testimony peels away another layer, exposing lives built on greed, silence, and fear. And when the gavel falls, it's never just justice. It's love turning into the cruelest form of revenge. If you think families are built on loyalty, prepare to discover how easily loyalty becomes the deadliest lie the silence inside the courtroom was thick enough to choke on. Broken only when the judge's eyes shifted, freezing in place as if time itself had been cut in half. His gaze didn't move toward the lawyers, nor toward the crowd packed tightly onto wooden benches. It locked on a single face. That face carried the weight of memories unspoken, a face tethered to a past too dangerous to name. The air grew heavier, as though every secret buried under years of silence was clawing its way to the surface, demanding to be seen. The whispers began, hushed but sharp, like knives scraping against stone. No one dared to say it out loud, but everyone felt it. There was something between the judge and that familiar stranger, something raw and unsettling. It was not recognition born of casual acquaintance. It was recognition that carried shame, fear, and betrayal. The kind that turned even the proudest man's expression pale. Behind every perfect smile of a carefully constructed marriage lived stories no one wanted to tell. Promises made under sacred vows had long been broken in shadows, replaced with meetings in dim hotel rooms, stolen inheritances signed away on false documents, and affairs with people who wore the mask of family friends. All those years, the image of loyalty had been nothing but a painted canvas hiding rot underneath. The face in the courtroom carried the key to peeling that canvas apart. The judge's throat tightened as though words betrayed him before they even left his lips. Papers rattled in his trembling hands, though his voice struggled to keep its practiced composure. The attorneys pressed forward, oblivious at first, until they too began to sense the shift, the tremor in the air. Something about that encounter threatened to unravel not just a trial, but a legacy built on silence. The husband seated at the defense table avoided looking back, but his stillness screamed louder than any protest. His knuckles turned white, gripping the table edge, every vein in his hand betraying the storm within. For years, he had hidden behind charm and authority, weaving lies so skillfully that even blood relatives bowed in trust. But there, under the watch of the court, the mask began to slip. The one truth he feared most was no longer a ghost lurking in private. It stood in flesh before the very man meant to deliver justice. A wave of unease swept across the room. Families seated together shuffled uncomfortably, exchanging glances that asked questions no one was ready to answer. Every breath held the possibility of exposure. The weight of betrayal was not carried by one alone. It dripped into every corner of kinship, where brothers turned against brothers, and wives held secrets their husbands would burn to keep hidden. When the judge finally spoke, his voice cracked under the strain. He called for silence, but the silence had already taken root, thick and suffocating, leaving every soul in the room bracing for the revelation that would change everything. Nothing in that courtroom would ever be the same again. Every whispered betrayal within the walls of a perfect marriage never truly disappeared. They lingered like shadows in the corners, waiting for their moment to strike back. What began as harmless suspicions had grown into daggers sharpened by truth. Each broken promise replayed in silence, louder than words ever could. Nights filled with excuses of late meetings, work obligations, or urgent calls became too familiar, while the smell of unfamiliar perfume on his clothes told stories he never dared to confess. The home that once carried laughter and the scent of fresh meals slowly transformed into a stage where every smile felt rehearsed. Conversations grew shorter, eyes avoided one another, and the distance grew wider, even when seated at the same table. Behind those closed doors, intimacy wasn't just lost. It was stolen, given freely to others who lived in the shadows of his double life. With every hidden affair, the trust that once bound two souls unraveled thread by thread, until love itself became a haunting memory. Friends who visited often whispered warnings, hints disguised as casual comments, but pride pushed them away. It was easier to believe in the illusion of loyalty than face the ugliness beneath it. Yet truth has a cruel way of surfacing. Receipts tucked carelessly into jacket pockets, unexplained withdrawals, messages left half, erased on his phone. They all painted a portrait he could no longer hide. The betrayal wasn't just in the act itself, but in the ease with which it was carried out, as though loyalty had never been part of the vow. The family felt the tension even before the truth was spoken. Children sensed the coldness in the air. Relatives noticed the absence of warmth, and neighbors whispered about the cars parked outside at odd hours. Each affair left a stain too dark to scrub clean, while every broken promise cut deeper into the soul than the last. The marriage had turned into a prison where love was the sentence and betrayal the punishment. He carried on as though nothing had happened, but his silence was louder than his lies. The shame of knowing, yet pretending not to, was heavier than the betrayal itself. Each time his eyes avoided contact, the truth screamed louder. Every whispered betrayal stacked upon the next until the weight became unbearable, transforming hurt into rage, and rage into something far more dangerous: resolve. Love had once been the shield against the world, but now it was the weapon used to destroy from within. Each hidden affair was not just a betrayal of the heart, but a declaration of war on trust, on family, on everything built together. And while he believed the secrets were safely buried, they had already begun to rise one by one, ready to strike back with the vengeance of truth. The marriage was never perfect. It was a carefully painted lie that shattered the moment the last betrayal came to light. What seemed like loyalty within the family was never loyalty at all. It was a carefully woven web of deceit, spun with soft words and false smiles. Behind closed doors, brothers plotted against brothers, sisters whispered secrets into the wrong ears, and spouses joined the games of betrayal while pretending to protect what they were destroying. Each smile across the dinner table hid daggers beneath it, daggers waiting for the perfect moment to cut. What was called family unity was nothing more than a mask, and every gathering became a stage where lies dressed themselves as affection. The husband at the center of it all carried his role flawlessly, convincing everyone he was the glue that held the family together. His voice was steady, his hand firm, his presence commanding. To outsiders, he appeared loyal, protective, a man who sacrificed for his own. But the truth whispered differently, traveling through the walls at night like smoke from a hidden fire. He was not just a participant in the deceit. He was the architect of it, pulling strings so cleverly that those around him never saw their own hands being used against them. Brothers who once swore to defend each other ended up selling out secrets for money and power, bribed with promises he never intended to keep. Sisters who vowed to stand united against the world instead became his confidants, guarding his lies in exchange for favors, pretending it was loyalty when it was nothing but self-preservation. Every choice he made pitted one family member against another, feeding on their weaknesses, ensuring no one ever suspected the scale of his betrayal. The betrayal ran deeper than affairs or stolen money. It was the corrosion of trust, the deliberate poisoning of blood ties. What looked like love was manipulation. What seemed like protection was control. He thrived on division, smiling as siblings grew colder toward one another, smiling as parents questioned their own children, smiling as every false story he created became a truth they believed. For years, the family believed the lies because it was easier than tearing apart the illusion of unity. But the day came when the cracks could no longer be covered. Documents surfaced, hidden letters revealed, hushed conversations overheard. What had been dismissed as suspicion became undeniable. The family empire, once strong in appearance, was built on betrayal so fragile that the smallest truth made it crumble. The most painful part was not discovering what he had done, but realizing how long he had succeeded in doing it while looking into the eyes of those he claimed to love. Every conspiracy that unfolded, every deceit uncovered, carried his fingerprints. And in that moment of clarity, it became evident that loyalty in that house had never existed. It was always a performance, rehearsed and perfected, until the curtain finally fell. The web he spun had finally trapped him in its own threads. The husband who once vowed love carried sins too heavy for the courtroom to contain. Sins that reached back years and spread like poison through every part of life he touched. His words at the altar had been promises of devotion, faithfulness, and protection. Yet behind that mask of honor lived a man driven by greed, desire, and betrayal. He had stolen not only the trust of the one who shared his bed, but also the inheritances that rightfully belonged to others in his own bloodline. Land, property, and money disappeared under his signature, leaving siblings and relatives stripped of what generations had built. He justified it with lies, claiming it was for the family's good, but the truth was nothing more than his hunger for power. The sins didn't stop with money. Forbidden relationships haunted every step he took, relationships that crept out of the shadows in whispered rumors and shameful discoveries. Friends who had once been welcomed into the home became secret companions in hidden rooms, while women who should have been distant acquaintances found their way into his arms. Each affair was covered with lies, excuses that grew weaker as the years passed. The betrayal was not only of vows but of dignity, tearing apart the sacred trust meant to bind husband and wife. The trail of destruction spread wider than anyone could see at first. Families torn apart over stolen fortunes, siblings turning against each other because of his manipulations, reputations ruined by his reckless choices. All of it left scars that could not be healed. Every decision he made in secret was a blade, and those blades cut into the people closest to him, leaving them bleeding while he stood untouched. For a long time, the weight of his sins stayed hidden, buried beneath charm and authority. He carried himself like a man above reproach, someone respected in public, someone whose word was taken as truth without question. But sins that heavy cannot stay buried forever. One by one, the lies unraveled. Documents emerged that showed his theft. Witnesses stepped forward to expose his infidelities. Whispers turned into testimonies, and the man who once seemed untouchable now stood with nowhere to run. The courtroom was not built to contain the chaos he carried inside him. Judges, lawyers, and spectators could barely absorb the depth of his betrayals as evidence piled higher with every passing hour. His eyes, once confident, darted with fear, and his silence screamed louder than any defense he might have offered. The truth was no longer hidden. It stood before everyone, undeniable, unstoppable. The sins he carried destroyed everything he touched, and now they had returned to destroy him. Each twist of testimony peeled back layers of carefully hidden lies, one after another, until the polished mask of respectability shattered. What appeared to be a husband devoted to family and duty was nothing more than a man living two lives, each contradiction sharp enough to wound. In the beginning, his charm blinded everyone. The way he spoke about loyalty, honor, and sacrifice convinced even the closest of kin that he was the pillar holding everyone together. But testimony has no mercy. It strips away illusions and leaves only the raw, unshakable truth. As the words poured out from the witness stand, it became clear that the life built around him was never real. His double life wasn't just measured in secret lovers or late night absences. It was etched in the foundation of an entire family empire. Properties acquired through deceit, businesses funded by stolen inheritances, and alliances secured by betrayal formed the true legacy he left behind. Every document, every signature, every hidden transaction revealed a man who thrived on control, greed, and manipulation. Relatives who once believed in his strength now sat in stunned silence as their names became part of the story. Brothers and sisters who trusted him learned that their futures had been sold without their knowledge. Friends who defended him in whispers realized they had been pawns in his schemes. Even the children were not untouched. Their security had been mortgaged against his ambition, their innocence tainted by the revelation of what kind of man their father truly was. The silence bought with fear had kept the truth hidden for years. Threats disguised as warnings, favors granted to keep mouths shut, money exchanged to silence witnesses. Every tool of manipulation was used to protect his secrets. Yet fear is a weak chain when truth begins to break through. Testimonies flowed like water bursting through a dam, unstoppable, overwhelming, drowning every lie he had carefully placed. The courtroom turned into a theater of betrayal. Every new voice revealed another piece of the empire built on dishonor. Affairs that once seemed like whispers in the dark became undeniable. Financial schemes hidden in shadows were dragged into the light. And through it all, the man who once demanded respect sat powerless, his double life unraveling thread by thread in front of the world he had deceived. Each revelation carried the weight of years of suffering, and each confession drove another nail into the coffin of the image he worked so hard to build. By the end, there was nothing left of the man he pretended to be. Only the ruins of his lies remained, crumbling around him, leaving everyone to see the truth that had been hidden in plain sight. The empire he built on betrayal collapsed under the weight of his own sins. By the time the gavel struck, the sound didn't mark justice. It marked the death of every illusion that had once kept the family intact. What began as a trial for truth became something far greater, something darker. Each revelation laid bare the kind of man who once vowed love and protection, but instead left behind a trail of betrayal and ruin. The courtroom was no longer about law. It became the stage where masks fell, and every lie he had carefully crafted turned against him. One revelation after another tore through the silence like a blade. Affairs once hidden in secrecy surfaced with undeniable proof. Inheritances, stolen through forged documents, were revealed with signatures in his own hand. Friends who once defended him came forward as witnesses, their voices trembling with the weight of truths they had been paid to hide. Every testimony was another strike against the image of loyalty and devotion he had lived behind for years. The family name, once respected, became synonymous with deceit and greed. The betrayal stretched further than the broken vows of a husband. It infected brothers who trusted him, sisters who believed in his promises, and children who grew up believing in the strength of their father's word. What looked like protection had been manipulation. What looked like sacrifice was self-interest. Bonds that were meant to hold the family together were shattered, leaving only fragments of trust scattered across the floor of that courtroom. The pain ran deeper than the lies themselves. It was the knowledge of how long they had been told, how confidently he had stood while everyone else was left blind. Years of sacrifice, of silence, of endurance, all crumbled the moment the truth became undeniable. He had never been the man he pretended to be, and every person who once believed in him now saw only a stranger sitting before the judge. The gavel struck again, but no one heard the verdict. It was drowned out by the weight of betrayal that echoed louder than any sentence. It was no longer about punishment, no longer about justice as the law defined it. The real punishment was the unmasking of truth, the stripping away of every lie until only the raw, ugly reality remained. Love had been turned into the cruelest weapon, twisted and used against those who gave it freely, until the only thing left of it was pain. The trial ended, but what lingered in that room would never fade. Every heart that once beat with loyalty now carried scars, and every bond that once seemed unbreakable was destroyed beyond repair. The final blow was not the gavel. It was the truth that left him with nothing. Thank you for watching this unforgettable story of hidden betrayals and shocking truths. If you were drawn into the twists, the lies, and the heartbreak, there's so much more waiting for you here. Don't just leave with questions, stay for the answers. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another story where love, family, and betrayal collide. Until next time, remember, not everything that looks perfect truly is.